So good morning, everyone, and good morning to our YVI audience. We're really happy to have on today Lilly Ice. Lonnie Ice is her name, and we all know her as Lilly Ice. And today, as you can see, she is a theatrical person. She is dressed as, please say the name of your character.
My persona is named Daifi Isfahani, which would be the Persian way of saying.
Okay.
In Arabic, it's Jibrail Daifi bint Mustafa al Isfahan.
Wow.
That's quite different.
Well, yeah, so Lilly, since this is part 3, many of our YVI viewers already know you. They've been watching you with your sidekick right there for every series. So let's just dive right in. Today, you are talking to us about your persona, and let's talk about how you got involved and give us a little history about your involvement with your medieval activities. Medieval activities, if that's how you say it.
Sure, medieval. It's a family thing. Multiple members of my family are participants. I count my participation from the time that I wanted to go for myself, not because the whole family was going, which was about the age of 12. Just because it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And I started out by wanting to research. You pick a persona based on what your interests are, what you want to research, because I mean the medieval era is vast and it covers it covers the world. It's period in time, and it's a pretty long period in time. We don't dress today like we dressed at the beginning of the 20th century.
Right.
You know, fashion isn't anything like the same. And I really wish my cousin from South Louisiana would quit texting me. But fashion isn't anything the same today as it was in the 1920s. You know, 1920s was swing and big band and suits and ties. And we don't, as I said, it doesn't look anything like that today. So it's inaccurate to say, oh, people in the 1400s dress pretty much the same as people in the 1500s. They didn't, not at all. And people in Persia didn't dress anything like people in England. So you have to pick a time and a place that's pretty specific to do anything resembling accurate research. So as an adult, when I was a kid, I was really interested in Ireland. That's part of my heritage. And I found out that there's not a whole lot of research on 9th century Irish. That's not a thing. I mean, it's really difficult to find anything. So as an adult, I went to the other side of my heritage, and my persona is a 1580s, more or less, Safavid Persian from the city of Isfahan. Now, if you were going to use the country of Iran as a dartboard and you at all were going to score points, you'd be hitting Isfahan. It's pretty much right in the middle of Iran. And Isfahan's also called half the world. It's one of the city's nicknames because it was right on the middle of several major trade routes. So like everybody showed up there. It was a very diverse, very happening place in the 1580s. Crusades had already come through multiple times. Crusades were unfortunate, but they did bring more contact and more trade. So picking a persona from that city, from that era, means that I get to be very cosmopolitan. I get to research a whole lot of different things. My persona is an Isfahani Jew, and I could not find my Jews were supposed to wear a yellow veil over shoulder or as part of their headdress, and I could not find mine this morning, no matter how hard I looked. I have it, it's somewhere, but I don't know where it is. 1580s Persia was Muslim by that point. It was ruled by Muslims. And they had a lot of what's called sumptuary laws, which are what you can and cannot wear based on your status. So like if somebody was blood related to the prophet, they got to wear this brilliant emerald green. And it was reserved. Things like that. You can tell I'm Persian and not Ottoman by the stripes. Ottomans liked big repeating designs that were like that big in terms of the size of the design. Both Persia and the Empire were big into textiles, weaving, jacquard looming, block printing. It was very common. What we think of today as paisley, that's a pomegranate. And they wore paisley, but it didn't look like today's paisley with the everything going everywhere. It was printed in a grid or to a gridded pattern. And they'd carve wood blocks, dip them in ink, and use the block to print the fabric. So that's a little bit about my persona. Being part of an Islamic nation in the 1580s, I actually had way more rights than women in Christian nations did. I'm wearing pants. I get to. It's great. I don't have to wear a skirt. This coat I'm wearing could be a lot shorter. I mean, I could have it up to here. I could have hemmed it here instead. I was not constrained into wearing this ankle length thing. The headdress, it's a two-part headdress. There's the undercap here and then the veil that goes over it. Now, this is a pretty simple headdress for that era. Men and women both wore them because it's hot outside. It's Persia. But this is like a working day sort of headdress. I'm trying to play with horses here, not in court. If I was going to court, if I was in front of a judge, something, it would be a lot more elaborate. I mean, multiple layers where the colors show. And I'd also probably have on more coats. I've got one little chemise here. It's very light. I mean, it's very light material. And this is medieval underwear. If you see people in medieval movies and so on, who were walking around in those poofy shirts, well, to us, they look cool, but in the medieval era, they're walking around in their underwear. That's what they're doing. You always wore a coat or a jerkin or a vest, something. That's what this is. Unfortunately, it's one of my winter ones. But because it's the most accurate, this one was sewn based off an extant example called the dragon coat that is on display. That is detailed enough that a bunch of people, not me, I haven't gotten to go see it, but they were able to look at it in detail and reconstruct the actual pattern pieces that were used to make it. There is not a single curved seam anywhere on this coat. They didn't have curved seams. They didn't have princess darts. They just didn't have this. This is all built with trapezoids and rectangles. And yet somehow it still manages to fit. Yes?
So when you say period dress, and even your buttons and what you have on your head, they try to make it as close to the exact replica of what you would have worn at that time, right?
Yes, accurate. This is my little pearl strand. Women of high rank wore them as part of their headdress. And this is, within some of the organizations that I play with, it tells people that I earned a certain rank through meritocracy, by service, by working. Obviously we don't have this is a modern organization. We don't have historical landed bloodline nobility, but it's cool to have lords and ladies and stuff. So how do you get lords and ladies and stuff? Out as awards for service, for work, for projects, things like that. This is the piece of it that's not entirely accurate. Okay. But this is saying that I have earned a certain level of regard for doing work, for putting these on, for teaching people as a horsewoman. That's what that says. But yes, we try really hard. These buttons were custom. A friend of mine makes them, and I ordered them from her. They're Ottoman. They're not quite Persian. They're Ottoman. But living in Isfahan, it's not completely inconceivable that I could have traded for Ottoman buttons. I mean, marketplaces are a thing. Okay. Ottoman Empire's next. But the rest of it, yes, I sewed all of this. I made it. Okay. And
wow.
back it up a minute.
And when you talk about the Ottomans, that would be modern day Turkey, correct?
Yes. Modern day Turkey was the center of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire was back then much bigger. So was the Persian Empire, for that matter.
Yes.
Iran was the center of what was the Persian Empire, but it was a lot bigger. What people call the Dark Ages was the Islamic world Renaissance. Learning flourished, astronomers, poets. There's a famous doctor named Avicenna, who was one of the first doctors to do dissections. He was Islamic. So yeah, right when the Christian world, Europe, was not communicating well, and was having problems keeping its books, was when the Islamic Empire, which stretched from Spain to India, was all the Islamic empires. There was multiple, and north up towards Mongolia. The big three were Persia, the Ottoman Empire, and the Mughal Empire. They were going through their Renaissance. They were opening up trade. They had books. The University at Cordoba, Spain, made paper instead of using parchment. So yeah, you get a lot of fun stuff. And as I said, I get to wear pants. And being a horse, really big deal. Now I have a pistol today.
So Lily, you
Yes,
touched on a few different ages. There were different stages, like Middle Ages, high, during the medieval times. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because I hear about medieval times, but I didn't realize there were various stages.
There's various stages. Okay, now we're talking about historical interrelations. Fun stuff. After the fall of the Roman Empire, which was not a quick thing. I mean, the fall of the Roman Empire took hundreds of years. There's no one date you can point to. I mean, people pick dates kind of arbitrarily. Okay, we think this is when it really fell, or this is when it really fell. But it disintegrated. First, it broke into the Eastern and Western Roman empires. And the Eastern Roman Empire was under the control of Constantinople. The Western Roman Empire was still under Rome, and they had their own separate emperors. And then the Western kept fragmenting. The Eastern shrank and grew over time until it was finally taken out by the Fourth Crusade in the 1200s. Constantinople was taken over. And when the Western Roman Empire fragmented, because it did, that's what they call the Dark Ages. And the reason that they're called the Dark Ages is not because they were awful, but because we just don't have a lot of information about them. They're dark because we can't see into them very well. It's almost like prehistory in a lot of ways. And there was trade, but it was limited as far as we can tell. Again, lack of written records is why it's called the Dark Ages. Is we just can't find a whole lot about it. Not because life was universally horrible. And then the Middle Ages, we start getting more writing. You see the spreading influence of the Western Roman Church. Charlemagne was crowned the Holy Roman Emperor of the Western Roman Empire. And he created this sort of empire in Europe that didn't last very long, but he got roads going back and he got trade going back again. He got exchange going back again. There's letters, there's writings. We can start seeing what's going on. And then as that grows, as it thrives, that's when you get into the early Middle Ages and or low Middle Ages and the high Middle Ages. And then eventually into the Renaissance. The Western Renaissance, the European Renaissance, was fueled by the Gutenberg press, the increased availability of books, the increasing economic variety and disparity. Meanwhile, Muhammad in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, his influence in the 600s made the Islamic world hit that point about 300 years earlier. Muhammad, it's not entirely accurate, but Muhammad did the same thing for the Middle East that Charlemagne did for Europe. He started getting trade going. He started building networks. He started building structure. And so the Islamic world was about 300 years ahead in terms of development, in terms of trade, travel, documentation, and so on. So,
And Lily, how important were horses in all of this?
well, how are you going to get from here to there?
Do you have a medieval saddle on your horse today?
I don't, but I have my saddle with me, but it needs leather work, so it's not safe to put on a horse.
Oh, can you show us?
Yep.
Okay.
Picked it up.
Okay.
This is as close as I can get. And you can see it's a little different from a regular saddle. It looks different from a modern English saddle. This is actually a 1940s British cavalry saddle that I modified to get it as close as I could.
Okay.
But you see the higher cantle here.
Okay.
And the this is cast iron here. This is all cast iron.
Okay.
And if you look under here, you can see it's built of iron and wood. Sorry, baby. You can actually see the underlying structure of it, and then the felt pad that's sitting on it.
Okay.
But this tree is made from iron and wood. It's not made from modern fiberglass. But as I said, my girth strap, I don't know if you can see, has a popped strap on it, and I have to fix that because until I do, it's not safe to put on a horse.
Okay.
But as close as we can come, this is called a hackamore, and originally called a hakima. And it's just a noseband. There's no metal piece that goes in the mouth. Now, again, a lot of this is guesswork. They did have bits. They did use bits and bridles, but a lot of times they didn't.
And so how can you control where the horse goes if it doesn't have a bit?
Well, this noseband, this noseband is more rigid than a halter. And she listens to the noseband. Here's the reins. They're tied to the noseband.
Okay.
Maddie, could you look inside, I think, by the computer and find the show Basel? Thank you.
So for people who don't know, the bit is the piece of metal that goes in the horse's mouth, and the reins are attached to it. And when you pull on one side, the horse will go in that direction and vice versa. But if there's nothing in the mouth, then that's why I was asking, how does the horse know what you want it to do?
She has a lot of nerves. There's some big nerves that come down right here. And that hard noseband puts pressure on them.
Okay.
Any bit or noseband or anything, it's just a communication tool. You're not making the horse do anything. No one has ever made a horse do anything. It's a 1,000-pound animal. What you gonna do? You're talking. It's a communication tool. That's what it is.
Mhm.
And all you need are, yes, that one, are nerves that are sufficiently sensitive.
Mhm.
Okay, this is a show nozzle, and it is, you see, it's much simpler.
Mhm.
And this is made from horsehair, the rein. And you
Oh.
can see at the base of the noseband
Uh-huh.
how tied on. So we have a lead rope, and then we have the looped reins. But as I said, you can see how this one's a lot simpler. So let me see if I can get my partner here to help me out.
Okay.
Or she'd really rather go EGAF off, but that's okay.
Mhm.
Okay, we're gonna take that off. In there. And how this works. Just like that. And then I have a lead rope.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can get it right. But you can see how simple that is.
Mhm.
There's not a lot to it.
Okay.
There's no buckles, so I'm gonna adjust it to her. This is hers anyway, so it's just a knot, and I want that noseband to hit about an inch below where her molars end. So I'm feeling her face. Those are her
Mhm.
teeth, right? My fingers on. The
Mhm.
molars end right about there. So I want that about there.
So the molars are the flat back teeth, the teeth that are farthest to the back.
Right. Don't put your hands up in there. That's a great way to lose fingers, but you can
Mhm.
feel it through this here. And
Lily, even though you said there are a lot of nerves, you're not
yeah,
hurting the horse, right? Unless people handle the
no,
horse incorrectly.
no, anything can be used to abuse a horse. Anything. However, you're gonna have to work a lot harder to do it with this. You're not gonna accidentally hurt them. You're gonna have to mean to. But the reason the sensitivity is important is so that when you can see her, I'm not pulling her. I'm just giving her signals, and she's moving her head
Mhm.
for me because I asked her to.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not pulling this rope and going yoink and pulling her head around.
Mhm.
I'm asking, hey, can you come this way for me? And
Mhm.
you see how she's responding?
Mhm.
That's one.
Okay.
Have you
All
ever
you're
known
doing,
a horse that was not trainable in this way?
oh yeah. I have met horses that were so screwed up that they didn't want to talk to people. They just wanted to hurt you. They had been hurt so badly by humans
Mhm.
that they just wanted to hurt you back.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
it's not the horse's fault. I hate that for them. But if they're dangerous, they're dangerous. And in my opinion, if they can go have a good life in a pasture somewhere and they won't just come after you for existing, then let them.
Mhm.
But they can't if their anxiety is so high, then sometimes the best answer is euthanasia. If they
Mhm.
just, if some human drove them crazy.
Mhm.
But the human that drove them crazy is, well, they say God has mercy, so I don't have to. They're not
Yeah.
my favorite.
Mhm.
If somebody
Yeah.
has hurt a horse,
Yeah.
but
For our listeners who don't know what the word euthanasia means, it means that you actually end the horse's life. It's a deliberate decision to end the horse's life in a humane way. And so it's just one part of the vocabulary when you're going into the animal world. We talk about euthanasia. That means that we are killing the animal in a humane way.
because because they have no
Which
quality
means
of life.
Yes,
which means
usually,
that that's
yes.
probably a shot or something, right, Monique? I mean, what
What's
does
that?
that for the layperson,
Oh,
even like myself, that just means a shot or something like that?
Normally, it's an injection of
Okay.
something that will stop the heart. But there are other ways to euthanize, and it depends on the kind of animal and the weight and all of that. But I just want people to understand that word. It's a word that you'll hear when people are talking about animals and animal health or animal illness. It's a word that comes up, and so it's just a vocabulary word that it's important to know.
Okay.
and the reason that I would consider it as a horse owner is I met a horse. I've actually met a horse who would charge through a 5-strand barbed wire fence just to try to come hurt me. I'm not even in his pasture. I'm over on the side. And he was so scared and so messed up
Mhm.
that he would cut himself to ribbons
Mhm.
because he charged through a 5-strand barbed wire fence. Is the
Mhm.
horse sliced up
Mhm.
just to try to come and kill me because he had learned that if he didn't get his licks in first, I would.
Okay.
He'd learned that
Hmm.
humans would do,
Mhm.
and that horse has
Wow.
no quality. I mean, he's cutting himself up every day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do you do with that? You know,
Mhm.
Right.
he
Sad.
can't get veterinary care. He can't get foot care. He can't. I mean, it's dangerous to go give him water. It's
Mm.
dangerous to humans to give him water or food.
Mhm.
What kind of quality of life is that? It's not.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And what kind of quality of
Lily,
life is to this and that anxiety?
Right.
So,
sorry.
but
Lily,
yes, Sharita.
speaking of foot care, during those medieval times, of course, horses were being shoed then. With you being a farrier, they were being shoed then. And was it similar to what shoeing a horse is now?
Um, yes and no. Uh, the earliest shoes were wraps made of leather or of straw, and then they got the idea of metal, but they forged the metal to have prongs on it. Like it was a horseshoe shaped like this, and then it had prongs coming up with it that went up the outside of the foot and strapped
Uh-huh.
onto the ankle. They're called hippo sandals. They're from Greece.
Oh.
Oh.
And then eventually they got the Romans. The Romans were the ones that got the idea to put nails in. Emperor Justinian of Constantinople and his wife, Empress Theodora, famously had their horses shod in gold and silver for a particular parade. And those metals are so soft that they only lasted for the parade. And I'm willing to bet there were people out there scraping the cobblestones because the metal would have worn off on the cobblestones as they went down the road. It was a show-off thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the shoes that they made didn't always look like the shoes we see today. They were often very wide, and the holes were punched near the outside of the width, where that width covered a bunch at the bottom of the foot. In Europe, they still find Crusader horseshoes all the time. And you can tell it's a Crusader horseshoe because it's got a cross cut into the toe of the shoe. That was a sign that the horse was going on crusade.
Mm-hmm.
And farmers turn them up in the fields all the time. Kentucky Horseshoe School has what's probably the biggest collection of in today. But yes, they shod them. Horses were vital to all this trade, all this commerce, all this warfare.
Mm-hmm.
Horses and donkeys. Donkeys were in a lot more common use at the time. That's what people used who were like not noble.
Mm-hmm.
Nobility used horses. Fun thing about horses. If a horse can trot, and trotting is the worst, most uncomfortable gait to ride. Ying, 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 ying. Means they can break into a fast gallop. So those were war horses. If a horse does what's called a gait, which is a special footfall pattern, usually breed specific, that's very smooth to ride, it often means they can't break into a gallop very quickly. but they're very smooth to ride. You can ride them for hours and hours and hours without getting that jackhammer effect. So you'll see in medieval tapestries all the time, the noble family riding along, and then a squire bringing the war horse behind, and the war horse isn't being ridden, he's being led. Well, why? Because that war horse was uncomfortable to ride for hours and hours and hours and hours. Okay. Because what he's got for a ground covering stride is that trot that has destroyed my knees and my hips and probably my ankles. So the family traveling would ride these smooth gaited horses that were pleasant to ride for hours, but on the battlefield, they needed that quick speed break. They needed that ability to go from 0 to 45 miles an hour in about 3 strides. Well, that's what the for.
Okay.
And war horses weren't a whole lot bigger than my friend Pistol here. They really weren't. They weren't these giant draft horses.
Okay.
Those are tractors. Those are farm animals. They pull plows, they pull harrows, they pull wagons. They're not fast. I've been run away with by one before. It was a very slow experience, but a very, very powerful one. It was like, do-da-dum, do-da-dum. We're going, feet were hitting the ground about that fast, but I could tell we were going through whatever was in front of us. Barn, yeah, we'll go through it. It's fine. The power. It was power, not speed. Well, on a battlefield, you need speed. So they bred for about pistol size here. Most war horses were about 15 hands tall. A hand is 4 inches. Is the basic unit of measurement for that we use for horses. Pistol here is right at that. She's about 15 hands tall. So that's how this works, so to speak. So they were going for, yeah, they wanted muscle. They wanted enough muscle, they wanted enough endurance, but they also needed that speed. So those big draft horses just wouldn't work. Just wouldn't. Also, jousting is not a battle thing. Nobody in a fight jousted. Jousting was football, okay? Jousting was a sport.
Okay.
It was never something people did to fight. But it was a lot like football. I mean, the movie A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger, Paul Bettany, is filmed like a modern day sports film, and it's got a lot of inaccuracies in it. Okay, David Bowie was not playing in the medieval era, but it's got the feel of it right. It's got what jousting meant to those people right. The people who made that movie went, oh, it's football. Okay, why don't we make like a sports movie about it? Like you'd make a football movie today.
Okay.
So no, clothing's not accurate. The armor's we can rip it apart all day, but it's great fun, and it really, really gets the feel of what jousting really was. It uses the modern terminology and vocabulary and stuff to get that idea across, but that's what jousting was.
Lilly?
It was, yes.
With you being in the middle of talking about jousting, can I show my screen for a moment? I just wanted to show that real quick. And so here I have up jousting, just a few pictures. And so I'm sure that our young people will be watching this have seen jousting, but until you said that today, I actually thought that jousting was a part of fighting, actual fighting. I didn't know that it was actually just a sport.
And then it was a sport.
Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. To do it, you had to have money. It has a lot of feeling like football, but it's really more analogous to car racing in terms of expenditure. And and yes, they would totally joust for pink slips on their horses. You'd put your horse up, horse and tack and armor and all. Just like informal car day races for pink slips for the ownership papers on the car. Yeah, they did the same thing with jousting. I'm a
Wow.
authorized for jousting. One of the founders of international jousting is a good friend of mine. And I've had to take all of his class on how to make sure the armor's safe, how to make sure the setup is safe, and all of that. And no, until I met him, I thought the same thing, that it was like practice for warfare. It's not. It's a sport. It's like car racing. It costs about
So
as much.
did women joust at that time?
Dodgy question. Because I wouldn't put it past a woman. I really wouldn't. Once you're up in that armor, who can really see you? Honestly, officially, no.
Yeah.
Officially, women
Yeah.
didn't. Women existed to make babies and be pretty. Okay, throughout most of Europe, throughout most of the medieval era.
Okay.
What was it? It's 1503 or 1603. The Anglican Church had an argument about whether women had human souls or not.
Wow.
So
Well, then,
their
women, I've
their
switched the screen
conclusion
over to the. Oh, go ahead.
their conclusion was that women had human souls so they could hold us responsible for our moral decisions, but that women didn't have, they had a kind of a subsidiary sort of soul, so they could still say men were better. It was an elegant bit of mental gymnastics to be able to say, no, we still get to blame you, but you still have to do what we say. Women rights? You were better off being at the time. And that's shocking today.
Well,
it really, we're used to think of Islamic countries as being oppressive towards women. But in the medieval era, Islamic women could own property under their own rights. They could run their own businesses. They couldn't just be stolen from. An Islamic woman could take a man to court and win back then. And that didn't happen in Europe. I mean, that wasn't a thing. Women were expected to shut up and breed and be pretty. So, were there women jousters?
Well, as you can probably see.
What's that?
Uh-huh.
Well, the odds are good.
I switched the screen to just show what women looked like during that time. And I don't know if you can see that, Lily. I'm just kind of showing what they looked like. I typed in women during that time in Persian. So there's a few that I can see look similar to what you're wearing. And then it's just showing a few other, the styles that they were wearing.
On those, you really have to check time period and attributions. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has an extensive collection of miniature paintings. But they range over in terms of empire and century. So.
Well, and so Lily, for jousting, did jousting take place only in Europe, or was that also in the Islamic areas?
It traveled some. Islamic areas had different competitions of archery, swordsmanship, basically showing off equestrian skills. Everyone who has horses, everyone who ever has horses, figures out some way of showing off with them. They just do. But what that looked like varied per region. In Islamic areas, there's a game called Bushquazi. Today we play it with a stuffed pillow, basically. And what you're doing is you're going out and you're trying to steal the pillow from each other and get it to a goal. So in a way, a lot more like football, just with less rules. It was an Islamic game of skill and how maneuverable your horse is. Can you grab this goat, and finish line with it? It's called a goat. We don't use a goat. They use, but we don't. We use a stuffed pillow. And it's jostling, and can you get your horse to shove the other horse, and can you grab this thing, and can you get your horse to take off fast enough? And that was a Middle Eastern game, if that makes sense.
And that's fun to the horses too, isn't it?
What's that? Say again?
And I said, that's also fun. That's also fun for the horses, isn't it? They're enjoying it.
A lot of horses. Yes, yes. Oh, my friend who taught me jousting, who taught me whatever I know about it, his name is Steve Hemphill, and he runs Aplaisance in Texas, in Austin, Aplaisance Limited, which is a jousting company. And his mare, Tinkerbell, she loves her job. She loves her job to the point that once he told her she had to wait because the guy that he was competing against wasn't ready. And the mare reared up and held it and just held her front feet about like 3-4 inches off the ground because she was so excited to go. She just held it until he said go, and then she just launched. When she knows she's about to joust, she gets all dancy and happy. Horses that are used for bourgeoisie, same thing. They like their games, they like their jobs. It's no fun with a horse that doesn't like doing what we're doing because they're grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're warm in your gear, and we so appreciate you showing us your the authenticity that you dress in and explaining all of that. We're about an hour, almost an hour in, about over 45 minutes. So would you like to give us any other information before we let you go and get undressed?
It's really hot in here, y'all. Without horses, human civilization would and did look a lot different without horses. We would still have it. I mean, it's crazy to say that we couldn't have it because the Mayan civilization existed, the Incan civilization existed, the Aztec civilization existed. Human civilization is not dependent on the horse. However, it would look very different if we didn't have them.
Right.
So.
Right. Especially here in the United States, we probably wouldn't even have cars had we not had such a great use for horses right now and saw how we could advance after using the horses and wagons.
Well, just to finish out, and then I'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
The lane of a modern road is determined by train tracks. The train tracks width was determined by ruts in old roads. The ruts in old roads were created by chariots. Chariots were built to the width of 2 horses' butts. So when you're complaining about traffic, it was all caused by, 2 horses' butts.
Well, thank you so much. Monique, is there anything else Lilly that you...
I have one other question.
Sure.
We haven't seen the whole body of your horse that you've been holding during this session. We've seen your horse's face, and I would like for you to talk about horse noses. The horse nose is one of the softest things on earth. I would just like for you to talk about the horse nose.
Okay, this right here is one of the most incredible sensory systems known to man. It makes the CIA at Langley look blind. It's velvet, it's soft, it's very sensitive. All these hairs, I don't know if you can see the hairs on the video. There's all these long hairs that are like whiskers. Each one of them has a gigantic nerve attached to it. And it lets her sense her environment to an incredible degree. This nose can smell next Wednesday. This nose can smell water from a mile away at least. It is velvet soft, and she's getting annoyed with me because I'm messing with the little hairs. And she's like, leave me alone, lady. This right here, horses at all, this little piece, quit there, really. Right there, you will find out where elephant trunks come from, because that part has a lot of muscle to it and can totally pick your pocket. If you think horses can't count, put 5 treats in your pocket. Now give them 3. Find out what happens. They know there's 2 in there. They'll go looking for them too. But this is like almost prehensile, that piece of her nose right there. And it's the part of her lips and nose that reaches out and selects what grass she wants to eat. They'll pick through grass and pick their favorite pieces. They're selective grazers.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's horses for you.
Okay.
Well, that explains a lot, because you know how sometimes you'll see horses in their pasture, but they're always at their gate and they're trying to get to grasses that are right on that other side. That's because they smell that it's something different than what's in there where they are.
Yeah. You have to mow horse pastures. A lot of people are like, what? You have to mow horse pastures? Yes, you have to mow them, because they will take the grass that's their favorite, and they will leave everything else. And so you'll get some areas that are eaten down to dirt, and you'll get some areas that are lush and tall because the horse said, that doesn't have the nutrition that I want. So I'm going to ignore that. But yeah,
Okay.
they can pick pockets, they can pick your change, they can steal your grooming bucket. The teeth, they are so sensitive that they can decide to give their child a little nip, just a little pinch. It's like a horse spanking. You, time out. Or they can reach up and shatter a carnivore's bone with those teeth. I mean, the bite of a bull can shatter bone. And
Wow.
they have the sensitivity to be able to modulate that to an incredible degree.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is awesome.
Well,
It
well, we
is.
thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for even going all the way in and putting on your gear, even with the weather the way it is. We so
Yes.
appreciate you. Thank you for these 3 series that you have taken us
My
through
pleasure.
and educated us. Is there anything last that you would like to say before we sign off?
I hope that whoever's getting into this has enjoyed my presentation.
Mhm.
If it's something that interests you, please look into it. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to find out about our history and our heritage and our culture. It's not something that's limited to Northern Europeans. History's all over the world. And it's just fascinating. The stories are endless. And I hope that going forward, you get appreciation of all the animals that have made our civilizations possible and their histories, and that helps treat them. I mean, this is the Youth Veterinary Initiative. If you want to work in the veterinary field, please do. We're sure good veterinarians.
Yeah.
But and if there's any way I can ever help, please, you're welcome to reach out. So
Wonderful. Thank
absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to future collaborations, and thank you again. And Monique,
absolutely.
thank you for being with us all the way from Paris. And with that being said, everyone have an absolutely phenomenal weekend.
Yes.
See ya.
Bye. Thank you,
All right.
Lily.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.